Thank you. Good morning. So, a little bit of background info about me. A lot of my time is spent working with, researching, and advising organizations to understand what the future of work is going to look like. And of course, management and leadership is a big part of that. And part of what I do is I run a group called the FOW community with a lot of the world's forward-thinking and progressive organizations that come together to explore what the future of work is going to look like. And a lot of the ideas and things that I'm going to share with you today are influenced by that specific community. So having said that, to get started, I'd like everybody to stand up for just 1 second. I know, making you work, it's early. I only slept for 4 hours, so if anybody slept less than me, then you can sit. You can sit down. You slept less than me, yes. All right, everybody stand on one leg. Okay, now put your hands up. And on the count of 3, everybody yell the word leader. 1, 2, 3. Leader! Okay, perfect. You can sit down. Now, some of you might be thinking, why is this crazy guy having us stand on one leg and raise his hands so early in the morning? And the reason is, there's probably around 500, 600, maybe more in this room. Does the fact that I was able to get all of you to stand on one leg and yell something that I wanted you to yell in any way make me a leader? I mean, you guys all listened to what I said, right? I gave an order, everybody followed it. Am I a leader? I'm sure many of you already know the answer to that, which is, of course, no. It does not make me a leader. Now, I believe that any employee within an organization has the potential to become a leader, but all the managers within our organizations must be leaders. In fact, the very survival of our organizations, I think, depends on our ability to make sure that all of the managers within our organizations are indeed leaders. When I graduated college, I went to go work for a technology company in Los Angeles. And when I was interviewing for that job, I was told that I was going to be doing a lot of really fun and exciting projects. Business development, I was going to go on meetings, I was going to go travel. It was a very exciting job. And after college, I thought, oh great, this is perfect, this is what I want. I worked hard, I double majored, I graduated with honors, and I thought, this is my chance. A couple of months in, I'm doing data entry, PowerPoint presentations, cold calling. Right? This wasn't what I signed up for. So shortly after, I had one of the executives came out of his office, and he says, Jacob, come here, I want to talk to you for a second. And I said, yes, what? Am I going to get something exciting? And he says, look, I'm going to be in a meeting with somebody really important. Here's $10. Can you go run and get me some coffee? And I said, this is it. I'm not supposed to be working at this type of an organization. Now, shortly before I left the company, one of the managers had a meeting for around 10 employees. He called everybody into a room, a conference room that we've all been in. He's standing, there's a projector behind him. He's got a jug of water in the middle with some cups, some mints. And he starts talking about goals and deliverables and projections and deadlines and tactics and strategies and all the things that a manager should technically talk about. After the meeting was over, a couple of us went out to lunch together. The manager didn't come with us. And I was already on my way out the door, so I really didn't care much. But during this lunch, the only thing that the employees could talk about was how much they hated the manager. How much they didn't trust him. They didn't feel safe when he was around. They didn't like his ideas. They didn't feel that he inspired, engaged, or empowered any of them. And it really got me thinking, how the hell did this guy get to be in a position of power at the company? I mean, there had to have been a meeting where somebody said, hey, Bob, what do you think of this guy? Should we promote him? And everybody said, yes, let's make him a manager. Right, so something happened to make this guy a manager. And ever since then, I've always thought about who is leading our companies? How do these people get into positions of power? And I think we're at a point now within a lot of our organizations where we're faced with a very difficult challenge. And that is, we've oftentimes separated managers and leaders. Right, so we say that managers and leaders are two separate people. And I'll prove it. So when you think of a manager, what do you think of? What are some words or associations or themes or terms that you think of? Anybody, just raise your hand or call it out. What was that? Efficiency. Okay, for manager, what else? What? Numbers. What else? What was that? Take risk. What was that one? Process. Accountability. Okay, now when I say the word leader, what do you think of? Do you guys see how different the words are? Do you see how different we even think about between a manager and a leader? And it's interesting because this is what we think of all the managers within our organization. Whenever we hear the word manager, we think, okay, this guy is process-oriented. He doesn't lead, he doesn't inspire, he doesn't empower. And when we think of leader, we think of all these great, amazing things. And the big challenge for a lot of our organizations today is that we've separated managers and leaders. And as a result, we're faced with a lot of companies where we have leaders that don't know how to manage, and we have managers that don't know how to lead. Neither one of those is a good option for us. So what happens? If you have a leader that doesn't know how to manage, the leader, like you said, is good at engaging, empowering, inspiring. He has the big picture, the vision, the idea, the concept. He tells everybody where we should be going. But what that person doesn't know how to do is the strategy, the tactics, the process, the risk, the numbers, the hiring, the firing, the building the team, right? Those are the things that quote unquote managers are good at. I see this firsthand because I live in San Francisco and there's leaders everywhere. Everybody has an idea for a product or a service or something that they want to create. And these are all technically leaders, but they aren't able to execute on these ideas. And because they're not able to execute on these ideas, they oftentimes fail. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have managers that don't know how to lead. And in that type of environment, we have people that know how to do process and risk and numbers and strategy and tactics and all these other things, but they don't know how to engage and empower and inspire and build trust and motivate and have this big picture vision. And I think this is part of the reason why we have so many of our employees around the world today that are disengaged. I think the recent numbers from Gallup show that only 13% of employees around the world are engaged in the jobs that they do. 13%. That means 87% of employees around the world are just walking around like zombies, just showing up for a paycheck. They don't care why they're there, who they're working with, none of that matters. And I think it's precisely because of that reason. We have too many managers that don't know how to lead. And I think the problem is that we have been taking people, promoting them to become managers, and then giving them leadership training. But instead, I think we should be taking the leaders within our company and giving them management training. Now, in order to understand all of this and why all this is happening, we first have to understand a little bit about the background of management and why management came into existence to begin with. What's the point of a manager? Why are managers even in existence? And, not mentioned Gary Hamel, who actually is one of the people that endorsed one of my books. And, he's inspired me a lot and given me a lot to think about too. And he helped pioneer a lot of these concepts as well. So what is the point of a manager? If we all worked at the same company, and let's say I was your manager, which would be very unfortunate for you guys if I was your manager. But let's say I was your manager. What would my job be if we looked, 30, 40, 50 years ago? My job would be to make sure that all of you show up on time, you wear the same outfit, you do the same job, you work a 9 to 5, you don't cause any problems, you don't ask any questions, you just shut up and do your job and leave. Right? That's the goal of a manager. I just need to make sure you show up and that everything keeps working. I'm a supervisor. I just watch people and make sure everything's okay. And not only that, but my job is to make sure that whatever the company is doing today, we could do tomorrow better, faster, and cheaper. That's it. That is the role of a manager. Now, there's a very fascinating story about a former submarine captain whose name is David Marquet. And David Marquet in the 90s was promoted to become a captain of a nuclear-powered submarine. How cool is that? A nuclear-powered submarine, he would be the captain of the whole thing. And he was given the call, and they said, David, you're going to be in command of the USS Olympia. And he was very excited. The USS Olympia was the Navy's proudest ship. The engagement was high, the turnover was low, and the crew consistently outperformed everybody else on training maneuvers. And so naturally, David was very, very excited about this opportunity. He spent weeks learning everything he could about the submarine, about everybody that worked on that submarine. He knew everything inside and out. A couple of weeks before he was supposed to take command of the USS Olympia, he gets a phone call. David, you're not going to be command of the USS Olympia anymore, Instead, you're going to take command of the USS Santa Fe. The USS Santa Fe was the exact opposite ship of the USS Olympia. The engagement was horrible. The turnover would make your head spin. They consistently underperformed everybody else in the Navy. In fact, the previous captain had just quit, and they needed somebody else to fill in. That's how bad it was. But David thought, I just went through a year of leadership training, and I can do it. He was told that if you give good orders, then you'll have a great ship. So he spent a year going through leadership training and just figured, all I need to do is give good orders. If I give good orders, people will follow it, and everything will be just fine. So one day he takes his crew out on training maneuvers, and they simulate a nuclear meltdown. So he turns off the reactor, he submerges the submarine, and he gives out an order. He says, ahead 2/3. And ahead 2/3 means that the ship should be powered at 2/3 of its maximum capacity. And usually in the Navy, when the captain yells out an order, the navigator repeats the order, and then the helmsman actually executes on the order. So David yells out, ahead 2/3, and the navigator repeats the order, ahead 2/3, and nothing happens. David looks around and he sees the helmsman just sitting there in his seat, very uncomfortable, awkward. And David walks over to him and he says, what's the matter? Didn't you hear what I just said? I said ahead 2/3. And the helmsman looks at him and he says, yes, I heard your order, but there's a problem. And he says, what's the problem? And he says, this submarine doesn't have an ahead 2/3 setting. And so David turns to his navigator and he says, did you know that there's no ahead 2/3 on this submarine? And the navigator says, yes, sir, I did. And he says, then why the hell did you repeat the order that I gave if you knew it was wrong? And I'm sure some of you might know the answer that he gave. Because you told me to. Right? And this is the problem with a lot of our organizations today. Now, instead of separating managers and leaders, I think we need people that can do both. Right? Regardless of what you call them, the people that are running our organizations must be both. They must be people that can engage and inspire and empower, but they also must be the people that can look at the numbers, they can focus on the strategy and the tactics and the hiring and the firing and the building teams. We need people that do both. Now, if you were to look at some of the world's most known business leaders, people like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, do you really think that these people only possessed half of these qualities? Do you really think that Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos only knew how to develop a vision? They only knew how to come up with a great product? Of course not. They were geniuses at building teams, at developing strategies, at focusing on tactics, right? That's what made them so great. They could do both. And I think that's where we need to focus, not separating managers and leaders, but intertwining those two things together. Now, oftentimes a lot of people say, why is this happening now? Why is it so important for this conversation to be happening now? And there are a couple of reasons. There are 5 trends that are shaping the future of work today, which are necessitating this change for all managers to become leaders. So there are 5 things happening within our companies. The first one is globalization. Globalization is essentially living in a world where boundaries of any kind do not exist. The culture that you subscribe to, the language that you speak, where you're located, the currency that you transact in, all of these things are starting to matter less and less and less. The whole world is becoming just like one big city. That's the first trend. The second trend that we're seeing is around mobility. A couple years ago, a college friend of mine and myself, we went to China for a month, just for fun. And we went to all the major Chinese provinces, Yunnan, Shanghai, Beijing. And in one of these provinces, we thought it would be fun to rent bikes and just go bike out in the middle of nowhere. So we rent these bikes, we get water, we get some food, and we bike out for hours in the middle of nowhere. We stop, get some water, look around, it's beautiful. 70 degrees, which is I think around 25 or 20 degrees Celsius. Look around, it's beautiful. Clear skies, huge mountains everywhere, rice paddy fields, green fields, it's gorgeous. And so we're just sitting there admiring the view thinking, man, this is great. And not too far away from us, there's a rice paddy field. And in the rice paddy field, there's a farmer. And I look at the farmer for a minute, just observing and seeing what he's doing for his daily chores, and he stops for a minute, and he looks at us, And he puts his hand in his pocket, and he takes out a smartphone. Now, I live in San Francisco, which many people consider to be the tech and innovation hub of the world. We're thousands of miles away from San Francisco, in the middle of nowhere in a rice paddy field, and there is a farmer in the middle of the rice paddy field with a smartphone. That is mobility. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you can get access to the web, you can get your job done anytime, anywhere, and on any device. And I found it fascinating that this person was able to get access to the same people and information that I was able to get access to living in the Bay Area. The third trend that we're seeing is around millennials. Right? Millennials are supposed to be 50% of the workforce by 2020, 75% of the workforce by 2025. They're digital natives. They have new expectations and values and ideas and ways of working, and they're really forcing a lot of our organizations to change. Now, it's important to remember that it's not just about millennials, right? There are plenty of other generations that are at play here besides millennials. But since millennials are going to become the majority of the workforce, they're really forcing our organizations to change. The fourth trend that we're seeing is around technology. Big data, wearables, like the one I have on my wrist here. The cloud, collaboration platforms, the Internet of Things. All of these technologies are transforming the ways that we work, why we work, where we can work, and how we get our jobs done. And the fifth and final trend that we're seeing is around new behaviors. If I were to find any of you 10, 15 years ago and say, hey, one day I'm going to know everything about you. I'm going to know the movies that you like. I'm going to see your entire professional history on LinkedIn. I'll know who you're connected with, where you're traveling. I'll know the restaurants that you eat at. I'll know where you live. I'll know everything about you. And you won't have to tell me any of it. You'd probably think that I'm nuts. Yet look at the world that we live in now. We put up reviews of restaurants and places that we visit on TripAdvisor or Yelp. We put up pictures on Instagram and on Facebook. We have our entire professional histories on LinkedIn. We put up our ideas and thoughts on Twitter. We have blogs. We live such a public life. We expect feedback and communication and collaboration to happen in very, very different ways. And so these are new behaviors that we're starting to see that are entering our organizations. And so these 5 things are really forcing us to rethink the purpose of our organization. And see, ever since our organizations have been created, we've had this very fundamental assumption around why companies exist. And that assumption has worked for the past 100 years, but it's not working anymore. And that assumption is that organizations can create a place where employees need to work there. In other words, we all have expenses, we all have bills, we all have mortgages, we all have kids. We have to pay for these things. And so we need to work at an organization to survive, to live, to thrive, to grow. It's our only way. You need to work at an organization. But look at where we are today. You don't have to work at a company anymore. You can raise money on Indiegogo or Kickstarter. You can work for a startup. You can create a profile on Elance and Odesk and become a freelancer. You can go work for Uber or Lyft. You can create products and services and sell them on Etsy. You can 3D print things, right? The opportunities for us to generate income and to survive and grow and live as people has dramatically increased and changed. And that means that the war for talent has never been greater, because the number one asset that all of our organizations have to bring people in has always been cash. That's how we attract and retain the top talent. We pay them more. That doesn't work anymore. And so what's happening is that organizations are having to shift their mentality away from creating an environment where people need to work there to creating an organization where people want to work there. You have to create an environment where people want to be there. And the only way that we can start to create that type of environment where people want to be there is by making sure that all of our managers at our organizations are leaders. If we want to create a place where employees are engaged and inspired and they bring their hopes, their dreams, their passions, their fears, their creativity, if we want to create an environment where they bring all of these things to work with them every day, then we have to make sure that all of the people within our organizations, all of these managers are indeed leaders. And I think there are a couple things that we can start doing. Number one, especially within our educational institutions, we have to stop teaching managers and leaders as two separate things. They need to be taught as intertwined disciplines. You can't have one without the other. You just can't. We also need to mentor a lot of these leaders that we have within our organizations, these people that are capable of engaging and in building trust, but don't have the skills to move up within our company. We need to find these people that other people trust and want to be around. We need to find the people that engage and inspire and empower. And those are the people that we need to be giving the opportunities to. So we need to coach and mentor them. And finally, we need to be taking these leaders, and these are the people that we should be creating and making managers within our company. Now, think about what your organization would look like if every single manager was a leader. Wouldn't you want to work in that type of a company? And more importantly, wouldn't you want to be that type of a manager? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well done. What was saying here? All right. Questions. And this is the kind of thing I'm sure we're going to get 100 different questions. So, yes, the gentleman over there, please.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Jorge Lopez. We as managers, sometimes we make mistakes, and we have made some managers already in our organizations. First, what is easier, to teach that guy to be a better leader or replace it? And the second, do you believe that everybody wants to be a leader?
Mm-hmm. So the first question is, what is easier? Is it easier to replace a manager, or is it easier to teach him to become a leader? Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people that will agree or disagree with what I'm about to say. I think leadership is very hard to teach, right? I think the qualities that people possess to engage and inspire and empower others, I think that's very hard to teach, right? I think it's very hard to teach somebody to be trustworthy, right? When you meet somebody, you can tell whether they are somebody that you want to be around or not. I don't think you can teach somebody to become somebody that can inspire and engage others. I think that's very, very hard to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's very, very hard to do.
But people can change and evolve.
Yeah.
And that's the process of learning too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I think is far easier is to take the people within our organizations that exhibit these attributes of being a leader and teach them the managerial skills, teach them the numbers, teach them how to build a team, teach them about risk, teach them how to hire and fire and how to build strategies and tactics. I think that is far easier, and I think that's a much more effective approach. So to your question, I think it ultimately comes down to the person that you're looking at. You know, some people have that opportunity to evolve and change, and I think some people, especially with a lot of organizations I've been speaking with, they just have managers in positions of power that unfortunately are, they can't get there, right? They just can't get there. And I think
what was the second question?
And the second question was, do I think everybody wants to become a leader? Absolutely not. I think being a leader is a choice. I think being a leader is a choice that every single person makes. Everybody in this room makes, everybody at your organization makes. But I think everybody has the potential to become a leader. So I don't think it's something that everybody wants to do. I think it's something that everybody can do, especially with these new technologies that we're seeing.
Cool. Any other questions?
This one right there.
So when I give your, just to, oh, there is?
En español.
Please, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you have a translate for? Mi pregunta es,
You need to grab this. Yep.
Un momento.
Please.
Yo hablo español poquito.
Ok. Mi pregunta es, sabemos que en Estados Unidos ustedes tienen un líder que es Obama. Creo que por ahí bajan muchas cosas. Es un ejemplo para su país, es una persona muy preparada, es un buen líder. ¿Qué tanto crees que influye esa parte que tu presidente esté bien capacitado?
Wow. That's a tough question.
That is a tough question. And unfortunately, I'm not that great at politics either. No, that's a great point. I think we can draw the same analogies that we have with presidents as we have with CEOs and leaders of our organizations. And I think a lot of the change that we start to see has to happen and start at the top, right? And I think a part of it is, and obviously when you're thinking about a president, it's different. A president gets voted in. Oftentimes within a lot of organizations, you don't have that kind of democratic process where you vote in a CEO. However, what I'm starting to see is that some organizations have experimented, and Gary Hamel wrote about this.
And I was about to segue to that.
Yep.
So when you also talk about the kind of organizational structures
Sure.
that would facilitate an organization where managers are both managers and leaders?
Sure. So I guess to wrap up on your point, I think it's absolutely important that the people at the top are well prepared, they are good leaders, because I think that's going to rub off on everybody else. Whether you're looking at the president of a country or whether you're looking at the CEO of an organization, I think that's absolutely crucial. If you don't have the right people at the top, it's very hard to sort of make everything happen going forward. And so your question was, what type of an organizational environment do we need? Well, that's a tough question. I think there are a lot of variables that come into play to create an organizational environment where you have managers that are also leaders. I know Gary's talked about this, a lot has been written about this. Really depends on, is there hierarchy, is there bureaucracy, what does the corporate culture look like? Is innovation something that anybody can have the ability to do? Ultimately, I think it always starts with the people that you bring into the organization. I think a recent statistic that I read showed that I think around 65 or 63% of all managers are currently eligible to retire now. And that number is going to go up in the next 5 years. So who's taking these jobs? Right? Millennials. Right? Millennials are going to be taking the jobs of all these managers that are retiring. And so one of the things I think we need to be very careful of and pay attention to is to make sure that we bring in the right people that take on those roles, right? Because we're starting to see this sort of the changing of the guard happen, and when that change does happen, we want to make sure that we have the right people there. But there are a lot of different strategies and tactics that companies are doing. There are 360 employee reviews, technologies that make it, collaboration platforms that make it easy for you to share and communicate with everybody. So there's a lot that can go into that. But I think it always starts with bringing in the right people that emulate those qualities that you want to have.
Great. Any other questions?
There's one here.
Yes, gentleman over there in the center.
Hey, sorry. I have a question.
No, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Antonio. So you talked about the millennials, and what would you recommend to young people as they get off college and start working for organizations? We all know those organizations who are very well to work at, like Google and stuff. They are very creative and stuff. But the rest of the organizations, the Mexican organizations that are very vertical, how can young people get to change the culture of the organization at a high level, since we start normally at entry levels and we clash with a traditional management culture in the country?
So to answer that question, let me ask you guys a question. Does anybody know what the average employee tenure is at companies like Google and Apple and Amazon? What's the average employee tenure? How long do you think people stay at those companies on average? 5, 3, 2? Between 1 to 2 years. Right, and these are some of the most innovative, most desirable companies in the world to work at. Right, 1 to 2 years. So to answer your question, what should millennials do? When I graduated college, my idea was I would go work for a company for 3 to 5 years. Then I would go back to school, get my MBA in marketing, and then I would go back to work at a company and move up and hopefully be an executive at some company by the time I'm, 40, 45. That didn't happen. So, not even close, right? After 2 years, I was like, this is it, I'm not doing this anymore. So I think for millennials, my advice would be that you have a choice, right? You have a choice of if that's even a decision that you want to do, right? Not everybody has to climb the corporate ladder within organizations. So I'd say that's the first thing. Decide if that's even something that you want to do. If not, there are a lot of other opportunities for you to pursue independent work, and now has never been a better time. But as far as if you are in that type of environment, what can you do? Well, unfortunately, the reality for a lot of people is sometimes you have to know when it's time for you to leave. Right? You can put in your work, you can build a case, you can try to implement change, but if the person above you, if the manager that technically has control over you, doesn't allow that to happen, it's like hitting your head into a wall. And unfortunately, in those types of environments, you either try to transfer to another position, or what we're starting to see, and which is why I think we have such high disengagement levels, is people quit. Because those aren't good environments to work in.
You have time for one more question. Can we take the gentleman over there?
Yes.
We have another one here. Yeah, sure, please go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Angel from Mexico.
Hello.
I would like to hear your comment. I think about this. Leadership cannot be taught because it's in the in the person's genius, and a very important portion is honesty as a wholesome, no? The person, the integrity, etc.
Yep.
I would like to hear your comment about it.
No, that's part of what I was saying earlier, and I tend to agree. Right, I tend to agree. I think there could be certain examples or situations where maybe that doesn't always apply, but for the most part, I tend to agree. And that's why I think most of our companies are promoting the wrong people, because we look for the wrong things. Usually the type of person that we promote is one that is good at enforcing the status quo. So we find somebody within our company that's good at taking orders, they're good at making sure they meet the numbers, and we say, oh, you're great, right? You're always doing things well, you should be a manager. But that doesn't always mean that you are good at getting a team to work together. So I think we're putting the wrong people into power. But I tend to agree, right? I think it's very hard to teach those types of characteristics and qualities of integrity and trust and all those other things that you mentioned. However, what we're starting to see with, like social media and social platforms is that all sorts of people are emerging as leaders. I mean, look at YouTube or Twitter. How many people that nobody has ever heard of now have millions of followers, millions of YouTube views? These are all people that many would consider to be leaders. And we have these technologies inside of our companies as well, where employees can share things they're passionate about. They can share their ideas, their creativity. They can show that they're empathetic, or they can show that they are supporting others. And I think these technologies are enabling a lot of these employees that are leaders to sort of show that that's who they are. But to sum up to your point, I agree. I think it's very, very hard to teach those leadership qualities and characteristics.
Your bias towards millennials is obvious, but what about women? Let me ask about women. Do you think women make better managers and leaders?
Yes.
Tell me why.
So I just wrote a big article on this, and I did an infographic on this for Forbes. And I have a whole section in the book on women in management.
You do realize it's the Harvard Business Review Summit?
Yes, yes, I do. But I don't contribute to you guys yet, so we'll fix that.
Incorrigible.
So I put this infographic together, and I have a lot of this research in the book as well, where, and it's interesting because when I was writing the book, I didn't think about women in management at all. I was very naive and ignorant about it. And my wife said, you should have a section in the book where you talk about women in management. And I said, why do I want to do that? And she said, just do some research and learn about it because you don't know what you're talking about. And so I spent months researching, and I was amazed at what I found. It turns out that women have, I think actually, I can't remember if it was Harvard, somebody did a study where they identified 16 leadership qualities and characteristics that leaders possess. And women outperform men in 15 out of 16 of them.
Cool.
Right? 15 out of 16. And I mean, you can look at the book, there's all sorts of research that shows when you have more women in power, the chances of a company going bankrupt decreases, they have higher return on assets, higher return on sales, they just outperform those types of organizations.
Great. And on that note, we'll have to end. We're out of time. Thank you again. Thanks very much. We've done from the side. Thanks very much, Jacob.